I thought he had an imaginary friend until he described a man who died in this house decades ago. I believe a house has a memory. As a carpenter and a restorer of old homes, I've always felt it. You feel it in the worn smooth surface of a wooden banister, in the faint scent of wood smoke trapped in the plaster, in the way the floorboards sigh at night. I thought this memory was a romantic notion, a story I told myself as I brought forgotten houses back to life. I never believed the memory could speak back, until we moved into the old house on Chestnut Street, and my 5-year-old son, Leo, introduced us to the man who had never left. The house was my masterpiece. A 1930s craftsman, neglected for years, but with good bones, as they say. I bought it for a song, promising my wife, Claire, that I would pour my heart and soul into making it our forever home. For the first year, life was a happy chaos of sawdust, the smell of fresh paint, and the sound of my hammer echoing through the old rooms. And through it all, Leo had a constant companion, Mr. Elias. We thought it was perfectly normal. An imaginary friend, a classic coping mechanism for a young child adjusting to a new, big, creaky house. Mr. Elias was a quiet friend. Leo would sit in the corner of the dusty living room, whispering to a spot of empty air. He'd leave a second glass of water on his knitstand. "It's for Mr. Elias," he'd explain. "He gets thirsty at night." "He's just settling in," I told Claire, dismissing her gentle worrying. "It's creative. It's healthy." I was so focused on the future of the house, on the walls I would build and the floors I would refinish, that I didn't pay enough attention to its past. The first time I felt a true chill was on a Saturday morning. I was in the dining room, preparing to knock down a non-load-bearing wall that I was sure had been a clumsy addition in the 70s. Leo was watching me, sitting on the floor with his trucks. "This whole room will feel so much bigger once this is gone," I said, mostly to myself. Leo didn't look up from his trucks. "That's not what Mr. Elias says," he said, his voice a childish monotone. "He says this was the pantry. The wall is supposed to be over there." He pointed a chubby finger to a spot 10 feet to the left. "That's where the real wall is." I laughed it off, but the comment stuck with me, a tiny splinter in my rational mind. A week later, it happened again. I had just painted the hallway a bright, cheerful yellow. Leo stood in the doorway, his face scrunched up. "Mr. Elias doesn't like it," he announced. "He says the house is sad when it's too bright." This was different. This wasn't just a fantasy. It was an opinion, a critique based on a competing vision for my house. The comments began to pile up. "Mr. Elias says his favorite chair was right here, by the window, where you put Mommy's plants. Mr. Elias wishes the old doorbell still worked. He liked the chime." I asked Leo to describe his friend. The description he gave was unsettlingly specific. Mr. Elias was very tall and thin. He wore stripy straps on his shoulders. Suspenders, I realized. His hands were always dusty. And he was quiet and sad, and he coughed a lot of dry, hacking cough that sounded, as Leo described it, like shaking an old box of dust. My renovation work became a reluctant investigation. When I finally took a sledgehammer to the pantry wall, I found the original lath and plaster frame of the house exactly where Leo and Mr. Elias had said it should be. When I pulled up the cheap laminate in the hallway, I found the original pine floorboards underneath, stained a deep, somber walnut. Every discovery I made, every layer I peeled back, seemed to confirm the memories of a man who wasn't there. The house I was lovingly restoring started to feel less like my own, and more like I was trespassing. I felt his presence, a quiet melancholy. Observer watching me undo his life's work. The breaking point, the moment that my skepticism shattered completely, came when I was working in the small attic. Prying up a loose floorboard near the eaves, my fingers brushed against something solid. It was a small tin box, rusted shut. I carried it downstairs and carefully worked it open. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed cotton, were two items. The first was a sepia-toned photograph of a man. He was tall and thin, with a serious, proud face, wearing denim overalls with suspenders. He was standing in front of my house, his house, which looked brand new. The second item was a folded, brittle deed of ownership for the property, dated 1931. The name listed as the owner, and presumably the builder, was Elias Thorne. I sank onto the floor, the photograph in my trembling hand. It was him, the man from Leo's descriptions. The quiet, sad man with the stripy straps. Mr. Elias. My quest was no longer about renovations. It was about finding out what happened to Elias Thorne. I went to the county records office, the place I should have gone before I ever bought the house. I spent an afternoon scrolling through microfilm, piecing together the ghost story. It was a quiet tragedy, the kind that fills the margins of history books. Elias Thorne was a master carpenter who had built the house with his own hands as a wedding gift for his wife. When the Great Depression hit, his carpentry business failed. A few years later, his wife, unable to bear the poverty, left him. The census records of the late 1930s showed him as the sole occupant of the house. He lived here alone, in the beautiful home he had built, which had become both his monument and his prison. The final piece was the death certificate. I found it in the vital records for 1938. Name, Elias Thorne. Place of death, 1138 Chestnut. Street, my address. Cause of death, pneumonia. Pneumonia, a dry, dusty cough. He had died here, alone in his 30s, in the house he loved and lost everything for. And he had never, ever left. The house is different for me now. It is no longer a project. It is a shared space. The memory I'd always felt in old houses was real. And this, one's memory had a name. When I work now, I work with a new sense of purpose. I am not erasing his home. I am honoring it. I feel like a caretaker, a custodian for his legacy. The house is no longer just mine. It's ours. Last week, I finished restoring the original fireplace mantel in the living room, a beautiful piece of dark oak I'd uncovered beneath layers of plasterboard. It was the spot where, according to one of Leo's earliest comments, Mr. Elias liked to sit. As I polished the wood, Leo came into the room and stood beside me, watching quietly. After a few minutes, he spoke, his voice soft. "Mr. Elias likes that," he said. "He says thank you for fixing his fireplace." Leo then reached out and placed his small hand on my arm. He looked at me with a startlingly clear gaze. "He says you have good hands," Leo whispered, "just like him." I had to stop working then, a lump forming in my throat. I finished the renovations a few months ago. Our home is beautiful. It's filled with light and our family's laughter. But the quiet observer is still here. I feel him in the settled silence of the evenings, in the cool spot of air by the big window. Leo says he doesn't cough as much anymore. He says Mr. Elias isn't as sad now that the house is happy again. I set out to build a home for my family. What I really did, I think, was finish the home of a lonely, heartbroken man and give him the family he never had. And as I watch my own son grow up within these four walls, this sanctuary we now share with a gentle ghost, I find myself wondering, when the day comes for us to leave, will Mr. Elias stay behind, waiting in the quiet? Or will he have grown so, accustomed to the company that he follows us to our next home, a silent, dusty friend, forever a part of our family?